Welcome to Reach for Healing. I'm Rebecca, and we are about 1 week out, maybe a week and a half out from the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States. And I wanted to stop by and just have a very quick chat about gratitude. Now, gratitude is a spiritual gift, certainly, it's a spiritual tool and a spiritual practice. And it's also something that's been co opted by marketers, and it now shows up on all manner of things in stores: throw pillows, mugs, necklaces, t-shirts, and more. And so in a way, this deeply spiritual practice of feeling gratitude has been commercialized almost to the point where it feels a little bit cheap. And so we run the risk of talking about gratitude, giving it lip service, especially in November as we get ready for Thanksgiving, and missing out on really the deep spiritual meaning that is inherent to what I call a radical practice of gratitude. And so tonight I want to suggest that you think about gratitude in a different way. It's really, really easy to be grateful for things that are going our way. And so if we're someone on a spiritual path and we're doing our work and meditating and doing our prayer work, and let's say we want to manifest a brand new house. We don't like the one we're living in, or maybe we're living in an apartment or a living situation that's less than what we would hope, and we want a new house. Radical gratitude is the ability to see that brand new house continually not show up and yet stay rooted in gratitude for the housing that we still have. That is not something that is often stenciled on mugs or throw pillows, and it's often not addressed in quickie spiritual videos. But I believe it's a critical learning step for those of us on the spiritual path. It's easy to be grateful and to give thanks and to be happy and to journal in your gratitude journal about things that go as we want them. It's much harder, and therefore, I believe, a much more powerful spiritual tool to dig deep and find gratitude in situations and circumstances that aren't quite going the way that we'd like them to. As many of you know, I write a blog. It's over on WordPress.com. It's practitionerspath.wordpress.com. And I've written a number of blog articles about how I ended up in my current job. And just briefly, about 7 years ago, I was working for a startup and making really good money, but I had some concern about the stability of the company. And I was at an age where it wouldn't have been great to have hung on there for 5 or 6 years and then be facing a merger or an upheaval or something that could have put me in a bad position. So I felt a deep, and I think at this, I looking back, I think it was a spiritual nudge to move on, and I ended up leaving the startup with the big salary and the gold Mastercard and the travel benefits and the 100% work from home job, and taking a very traditional job at a $30,000 pay cut, where I drove to work 5 days a week and entered a very bureaucratic environment. And the first couple years were pretty bleak. They were bleak because of the financial hit that I took. They were bleak because the bureaucratic environment was much less welcoming of my gifts and talents. There was a lot more fear in this organization, and a lot more, oh, how would I describe it? Just people were just really entrenched in the way that things have always been. Unlike a startup where new ideas are encouraged and welcomed and embraced, and everybody's in a startup environment, and I'm sure there are startup environments that have issues, but in the startup environment, generally, new ideas are welcomed and people are encouraged to share, and everyone kind of stands on their own. Egos are there, but people are confident in what they bring to the table. And the polar opposite of that was going on in this job that I moved into, and so it was very, very difficult. And the reasons that I had moved into this more traditional and bureaucratic environment was to secure retirement and to really go into my last 10 years of full time work in a more stable position. But as I settled in and the newness wore off and the reality hit, there were many days, many weeks, many months truly that it was very difficult to be grateful for that job. It was difficult to be grateful for any aspect of it. And the thing of it is, I had learned enough about my own spiritual journey, about the tools, the spiritual tools that I was studying, to know that I wasn't going to be able to do some chanting and meditating and consultation with a spiritual teacher and link myself back into a startup position. I tell my kids all the time everything in life's a trade off. And I had come into this position very specifically for stability long term. And so I felt that I needed to figure out or learn how to stay there. And I needed to learn how to stay there in a positive way because staying somewhere and being miserable is not an option. And so I began to work on just what I'm sharing with you tonight, this radical gratitude, this intense gratitude. So as I went to work 5 days a week, driving about 30 to 45 minutes each way, I looked around for something to find to be grateful for. And the first thing I found was there's a store on this property that sells fresh fruit. They still do fresh fruit. It's cut up in little cups and sells for anywhere from $1.20 to $2.17. And I realized at the time I was working on really changing my life in terms of eating healthier. And so I realized in the morning I could take my break, walk over, take a brisk walk, stop by the store, and for less than a handful of change, get a small cup of fruit that was already cut up. So I really threw all my energy and all my intention and all my work into appreciating the grapes, the cantaloupe, the strawberries every Monday through Friday. And not very long after I made this decision to appreciate the fruit, I realized that there was another option here to be very grateful for, and that was this location is on a lovely suburban campus that's relatively flat, with a little bit of ups and downs, but very easy to walk. And as many issues as there were in this organization, one thing that's very good about it is that people are encouraged to exercise. They're encouraged to walk on their lunch. And so I was able every day at work when the weather was reasonable to get a brisk mile walk in. And so for a few weeks, I focused entirely, no matter what other shenanigans were going on. And I experienced a lot of shenanigans, a lot of hostility, and a lot of gaslighting. This is a place where I learned about the term gaslighting because I experienced it regularly. No matter what was going on in that regard, I made sure to pay attention each day to being grateful for that fruit and being grateful for the opportunity to walk. I had an office, so I was able to buy a pair of tennis shoes and put tennis shoes and bring in clean socks every Monday and spend time walking each day. Not long after that, I realized that that 30 to 45-minute commute each way was actually a pretty nice block of time to enjoy audiobooks. And our library has a wonderful and immense collection of audiobooks. And so I began to borrow audiobooks and listen to those on the commute. And actually ended up catching up with some favorite authors of mine that I wouldn't have had time to sit down and read. So as I shifted my thinking and my focus and my attention to these very small and seemingly insignificant pieces of good, little islands of good in the midst of what could have been described as kind of a miserable time in my life, I began to see things shift. Pretty soon, I had the idea that I should I looked around and although there were some people that were questionably um, of questionable intention toward me, I realized that there were an awful lot of good people there with good intentions and helpful. And so one day I took a small notebook, and if you've hung out with me very long, you know I have an affinity for these little dollar store notebooks. And I took a notebook and I began to write down people that were good to me, people that did something that were kind to me, that were pleasant, that were helpful. And pretty soon I had a lot of pages filled up with names. And if I fast forward, and that was about 7 years ago when all this started, fast forward to today, and I can tell you what those small decisions to focus on being grateful on those small things did. Today, I'm in the same job. I've moved up, so I'm not still making. My salary has caught up. I've had a couple of promotions in there. Um, I have experienced awards and recognitions in my field, and the people who were challenging to me have left or have turned around. And I now enjoy my job very much. And I enjoy where I work very much. And I can honestly share that it started with me making a decision in the midst of a lot of very difficult times to appreciate a couple dollar cup of fruit. And it grew from there. So I wanted to share that story because I think a lot of us get caught up in gratitude, in the commercialized aspect of gratitude, and we miss the deeper power, the deeper strength, the deeper magic, if you will, that exists if we can take gratitude and apply it to our lives in a way that seems counterintuitive. Being grateful for small things in the midst of what seems like a storm. Being grateful for things that might even be seen to be putting energy into keeping us where we don't want to be. Finding the ability to look at a situation or a circumstance that doesn't feel very ideal and finding some small piece of it to enjoy, to appreciate, to be grateful for. I have seen this work in magical ways. And since it is the week before Thanksgiving, wanted to share that with all of you. I hope you have a wonderful, bountiful, and blessed Thanksgiving, whether you're spending it with family or with yourself in this time of COVID. A lot of us might be sitting at home and zooming in to family and friends. Remember that you're never alone. Sri Sri and Andamurthy tells us we're never alone or helpless, that the force that guides the stars guides us too. And I know that that force guided me to fresh fruit in a company store and appreciation that helped me stay at a job that is securing my retirement and my career in a way that I couldn't have foreseen in a very dark time. I hope that my story will inspire you and help you, uplift you, and maybe just help you hang on a rough week. Until next time, take care.